Welcome everybody to this session on sleep. Really pleased to have with us Dr Sarah Hattam from Concilio Health. Dr Sarah has certainly shared a number of her experiences around different types of mental health conditions, as well as that combination of how it impacts on physical health. Sleep, of course, for many people can be a real challenge. But certainly getting the right type of sleep, and I'm sure Sarah will share with us her thoughts and some tips and some examples actually of when sleep doesn't really happen and what the impacts can be. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me on. It's great to be here on the engagement tree. So love what you're doing. So yeah, thank you. So I mean, unfortunately, I learned about the effects of sleep deprivation the hard way. So in my first year of being qualified as a doctor, as a junior doctor, working all hours, long before the European Working Time Directive came in, a 90 or 100 hour plus week, what wasn't uncommon. And several things happened that year actually, but the net result of all of them, including the lack of sleep, was that I ended up going off with burnout. Really actually for quite a number of weeks wondering if I'd actually managed to qualify I was qualified but managed to actually get registered. And I think what was interesting about that time was it was the one and only time in my life I got absolutely floored with flu. Taken out for sort of a couple of weeks in bed, and I'm absolutely sure that was just down to the effects of prolonged lack of sleep, because we know that sleep has multiple benefits, for our mental health, but we know that when it comes to our immune system, a poor night's sleep actually results in us losing about 3/4 of our body's natural killer cells that help us fight off infections, viral infections as well. In fact, it's really interesting what you can actually get a research grant for these days, but there was a little experiment done in America where they took a group of volunteers, healthy volunteers, and what they did was track their sleep for a week using these really kind of expensive actigraph watches, so very, very precise measurements of sleep. And then what they did, and I'm waiting for you to pull a face here, Sharon, but they basically then squirted a nice dose of the common cold virus up their noses. You got paid a lot of money to have that done, haven't you? And then they tracked them and watched who actually succumbed to the cold. And what they found, it's really interesting, was that the people who had slept poorly that week before were about 4 or 5 times more likely to develop cold symptoms than the people who'd had really good sleep. So, we know that it's particularly important at the moment with COVID-19 circulating in the community, that actually one of the best things that people can do is to try to prioritize good sleep as a sort of immune boosting tool. In other words, if we get it, we're probably going to perhaps get it less severely if we're well slept. But yes, I mean, I always say I love talking about sleep, and I love doing it even more. So I'm a bit of a secret napper in the afternoons if I get a chance. That's sort of guilty pleasure.
Love nap. I am.
In fact, you've just about caught me. Actually, I'll be putting my head down in a couple of hours.
About a 3 o'clocker, I have to say. But sleep it can be annoying because we know we need it. And anybody who's been sleep deprived, it can be frustrating to lay in bed and just think I should be asleep now, but I can't. And for whatever reason, there's something there preventing me from getting that sleep that I really need. I'm sure, Ben, you've got some examples there too of when we're feeling a little bit kind of off kilter and sleep is just not happening for us.
I think for me, sleep at the moment, getting to sleep doesn't seem to be a problem, and I've never been one that struggles to go to sleep. My issue is staying asleep. So I'll sleep beautifully for the first 2 hours. I'm fairly clockwork in terms. I'll go to bed roughly about 11, but you can guarantee that between 1 and 3, 1 and 4, in this current situation, I sleep terribly. And normally I've always been a relatively good sleeper, but certainly in the current situation with isolation, those 2-3 hours in the middle of the night really struggle.
I think there's potentially several reasons for that, actually, Ben. I mean, what we know is that we tend to sleep in cycles. Obviously, there's individual variability to those, but they're about 90 minutes each through the night. And interestingly, our brain has evolved to, in between the very deep sleep cycles that we get, our brain has evolved so that we come very near to waking up, actually, between each sleep cycle. And that's really just so that we sort of can scan the environment for danger at a sort of subconscious level, and just make sure that, you know, it's safe for us to go back into that really deep sleep. And I think, you know, we've got this tiny part of our brain, our emotional brain, which has sort of evolved with us because it keeps us safe when we face a threat or danger. And I think at the moment we're facing so much uncertainty. You know, that the news is troublesome. A lot of us perhaps check into the news in the evening. So I think this emotional brain is probably more on guard than usual. And so I think when perhaps you do come near to wakefulness, perhaps you are actually then waking up. And that's the point at which we get the thoughts, the to-do list starts running round, anxiety starts to kick off, because that emotional brain at that point, really our adult brain is still asleep, and it's our emotional brain that's sort of kicking off, which is why things always feel worse in the middle of the night. I think the other thing is, you know, that we're all a bit disjointed and a bit dislocated, aren't we? If we're working from home, and we know from the CIPD that we've got about 7.2 million parents are trying to work from home at the moment, of which 7,000 are lone parents. And it's, you know, people are having to sort of work a split shift. So I think Slack, the online tool, has shown that, you know, there's a drop off in the traffic on Slack during the day, during normal working hours, but there's a peak, a new peak starting to emerge sort of in the late afternoon and evening. So I think that's the other thing, is people are probably logging onto devices, getting that blue light exposure, which we know, although we can't see the blue light that's coming off the backs of our screens, not the back of our screen, but any backlit device, it still will be stopping our brain producing that sleepy hormone. And that may be one of the reasons why you're struggling to stay asleep, because you need a really good level of melatonin in your bloodstream to keep you in good quality sleep through the night. So I think there's lots of reasons, actually. I think a lot of people are in that, but I'm hearing that from patients and clients at the moment, that, you know, sleep's more broken. And
What about children, Sarah? Children who are also maybe suffering from shifting sleep patterns, have you any evidence of that?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting and a great question, actually, Sharon, because I've sort of wondered about this. So what we know is that in the teenage years, teenagers' body clocks really do advance. So we do see a sort of a very real physiological shift. So actually they genuinely want to go to bed. They're not being difficult. They genuinely are not tired and ready to go to bed till perhaps midnight. But then again, they need to then sleep in the morning. You know, if you're someone who's got teenage children and you're asking them to go to bed at sort of 9:30, it's the equivalent of asking us to, you know, bed down about 6:30 or 7 in the evening. They're just not ready for it. And I have wondered whether actually the whole kind of homeschooling and logging into school online may actually mean that teenagers are actually able to work better with their body clock, so they may be able to actually get a bit more sleep in the morning. Because we know that the school routine usually in business as usual times actually it plays against this shift. But I think that the thing that counterbalances that for me is the fact that they're probably spending more time on devices. You know, we know that a third of teens, I think it was the Sleep Council did a survey a while ago, and, you know, a third of teens are only getting 4 to 7 hours of sleep a night on average, which is nowhere near enough. But 80% of them and above have got not 1, not 2, but 3 devices all charging in their bedroom. And I think, you know, that at the moment, that's the way we're all maintaining social connections, isn't it? Is on social media, Zoom, we're doing it now. But I think if they're starting to do that in the night, it's going to have an impact. And what we know for sure is that it has an impact on their mood. So a great night's sleep is a bit like putting your emotions through a strainer, through a sieve. It really does sieve out the negative stuff from the day. So if they're not getting good sleep, actually it's going to start to impact their mood. We know it affects their learning. So we know that the short-term memory area in the brain just has a finite capacity. So once it's full, and we rely on a good night's sleep to transfer the key information that we need to remember from that short-term storage area into our longer-term storage areas in our brain. So if that's not happening, then we know that they might be losing, they might not be retaining up to 40% of what they've learned that day. I think it could potentially be having a huge impact.
And is that the same? Are those stats the same for everyone? I mean, I've got a child who's in primary school, and I'll be honest, her sleep pattern is all over the place. I'm missing hours. I mean, our whole household is kind of impacted. But then you touched on it earlier. I'm working from kind of 7 in the morning. Then my other half will do a little bit, and then I'll do a little bit. Yeah. And we're kind of, one of us is on a laptop up until kind of 10:30. My little girl, she's using the tablet for her schoolwork. So are those stats kind of the same for all ages? Does it impact at different ages differently?
No, I mean, the impact on your memory and your learning is the same whether you're a child or an adult, because that hippocampus has a finite capacity. I mean, one tip that I use if I have to be on my laptop in the evening is, I haven't got them, I was looking around to see if I got them to hand, but I've got some blue light blocking glasses off Amazon. They're really cheap, they're about a tenner. I mean, I always joke that my kids say I look like Ali G when I'm wearing them because I've got yellow lenses, but actually they do block the blue light from emission from your screen. And there's a piece of free software that you can download called f.lux as well, which will also do the same. So I think that awareness, and I think with children particularly, I think that the key is in predictability. So actually, if you can get a really consistent bedtime routine going, so it's not varying day on day and not varying a lot at the weekends. I mean, this is the same for all of us. Actually, you increase what's called your sleep efficiency. So you actually, your brain gets into that deeper sleep quicker. So the hours that you are in bed, you're sort of getting better quality sleep because your brain sort of knows, well, this is bedtime, this is wake up time. I can get on with the business of sleeping now, that getting that really good restoration and reboot. But I think what we know for children is that their brains are still maturing. So we see what's called synaptic pruning. So actually their nerve connections are being pruned and refined, and sleep is just absolutely critical for that. We also know that a lot of mental health problems can be traced back to adolescence, and the early signs start to emerge in adolescence and young adulthood. And again, there's that whole two-way association between mental health and sleep. So we know that sleep's really important for good mental health, and that where we see sleep going off it, often that's the early sign that a mental health problem could be emerging.
I think it impacts into a number of things as well, because it can impact onto your performance. It can make us feel a bit cranky, if we're being really honest.
No, too right, yeah.
Especially when we're all kind of in the same four walls as a family, often a function together. Yes. Can be a challenge at times.
Yeah.
So performance. I know this is something that you've talked about many, many times, Sarah. Performance, doing the day job, but even just around making sometimes those mistakes. You've seen some real evidence of that, haven't you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we know that where we are, when we're underslept, we are less creative. So we've talked about our emotional brain that's sort of evolved with us, but as we've evolved and got cleverer, more intellectual, we like to think, we've developed this area of our brain called the prefrontal cortex. It's where our most adult functions take place, where we think logically, where we process different data points, even where we sort of can collaborate effectively with colleagues. And a bad night's sleep is a bit like a double whammy. So not only is the emotional brain more active and kicks off way more, a bit like a badly behaved toddler after a bad night's sleep. So our emotional brain's going off like that when we haven't slept well. But our adult brain is also really impacted by a poor night's sleep. So we just don't function as well at work. And the really interesting bit of info is that we lose insight. So we actually think we're not doing too badly. But when you objectively measure people's performance and the amount of mistakes they're making, you can very clearly see a link. But we, as the tired person, don't always pick up on it. So you're absolutely right. And I mean, when we go into businesses and run our sleep training or sleep coaching, it's fabulous when you see these aha moments and people start to make a few changes, and we go back in a few months later and they go, I've reduced my caffeine and I'm not drinking until late in the evening, and I've got some blue light glasses, and it's all kind of percentage gain stuff. But for the employer, a well-slept workforce is going to up productivity significantly. It really hits people's bottom lines. It really, truly does, which is why I love talking about it, as you can probably tell.
and changes lives. I think the key, I know when I've had a good night's sleep. More so, I know when my daughter and my other half have had good night's sleeps, or I know when they've had bad night's sleep. So for me, it's there's nothing better than having that real wake up in the morning feeling refreshed. So what kind of what advice, what tips, what can people look at, and what can people do, and what can people focus on? What are the core areas for them to prepare and get a good night's sleep? I know you're talking about marginal gains there, but whilst they're in their homes, what are the things that they can do or get their family to do to ensure that they're at least setting themselves up for a good night's sleep?
Well, there's some, I mean, there's probably, I'd say there's probably 3 top principles when it comes to sleep. One of them I've already mentioned, which is just be really super consistent when it comes to your bedtime. Be boring. I mean, try to pick a time for bed and a time to get up that works for you, whether it's a weekday or a weekend. And I guess, because that increases our sleep efficiency, so we get better quality sleep. So, we live in the real world, and when we're not in lockdown, we know we like to see friends, we like to go out on a Friday night, whatever. So, if you have a late night, the better thing to do is to get up at the same time, even though that will probably feel like an absolute killer. Have a short after lunch nap of about 20 to 30 minutes and go to bed the same time that night. But what a lot of people do is they'll have a long fat lie-in, and that potentially then throws their sleep out for up to a week after. So that's a tip. Be really consistent. And again, it's worth, I guess, working with your kids to get that consistency. The second point I'd say is work with light. So actually we really need to get some blue light flooding the back of our eye, in the form of natural daylight in the morning, certainly by lunchtime if we can. And then we want to be reducing that blue light exposure in the evening, so dimming the lights at night, watching laptops and usage of screens. And we know that the more blue light we get in the day, the less likely we are actually to get that melatonin suppression from blue light in the evening. So you're almost kind of, by getting blue light in the day, your brain's going to be less disrupted if you do get it at night. And the last thing is, I would say, just, really kind of protect your bedroom environment. So this is really hard at the moment because a lot of us, we are home working. I'm at the moment in my son's bedroom, actually. I'm really glad you can't see over my shoulder to the dirty laundry pile. Anyway, but we don't want our bedroom to be our portable breakfast bar, our home office, the kids' playroom. We want it to be a haven for sleep. So we want our body and our brain to know that when we go to bed, it's time for sleep. So you want it to be cool. You want it to be a bit cooler than the rest of the house. You want it to be dark. You want it to be quiet, and try to avoid using it for other things, and keep tech out of the bedroom. If you can, charge your phones outside, downstairs, where you just can't be tempted if you hear a ping to jump on the latest sort of LinkedIn discussion at 2 a.m. in the morning. And caffeine and alcohol as well. We know the stats say that people are drinking a bit more at the moment. You need to just be aware, I guess, of the potential for caffeine to linger in the bloodstream for a good number of hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours after you've had your last dose of it. And the same with alcohol. Is alcohol often helps people. They say it helps me get to sleep. But what we know is because it disrupts blood sugar levels, that 2 or 3 hours after you've drunk it, you're likely to then wake up with a racing mind, and it does interrupt the architecture of your sleep. So it's just about, it's not about being a killjoy. It's about being real and pragmatic, but just saying just keep an eye on those things as well, really. Yeah.
I think it's also important just to remind people that caffeine doesn't just come in coffee and tea.
Yeah.
These drinks, these
chocolate
type drinks that give us that high and then give us that slump. Just being mindful about what we're putting into our bodies.
That's a really good point, Sharon. Yeah. Cola as well contains caffeine, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And also decaffeinated drinks contain caffeine. That was a bit of a new one on me a couple of years ago. It depends on the brand as to how much caffeine is in them. So if you drink a lot of decaf, you still could be getting a reasonable dose of caffeine. So yeah.
For me, it's probably the alcohol that's that isn't helping. And it's shameful to say, I probably haven't had, since we went into lockdown, I probably haven't had one day where I've not had a drink.
Yeah.
Now, previously, before we went into isolation, I would have only drank probably on weekends, and I wouldn't have drank in the week because I'm at home. And now, because I'm at home, I have done, since we went into lockdown, I've had a drink, not lots to drink, but I've had a drink every day.
I don't think you're unusual, Ben.
Yeah.
And let's face it, most of us are losing track of the days anyway. So I think it helps to almost psychologically demarcate the end of your working day, or day and evening, doesn't it? Because we can't go out and do anything.
Yeah.
But I think so what I normally say to patients is, just do a little experiment with yourself. N is 1 of 1, but see actually how your sleep feels on the nights that just to start to introduce some of those drink-free nights, and see if you sleep better, because you almost certainly will, actually. Yeah.
It's interesting that I think sales of alcohol in the UK have gone up by 47%.
I know.
So,
no, well, after toilet roll, that was the next empty shelf in Sainsbury's, wasn't it? And Asda, it's like, toilet roll and booze. I wonder what people. Flour, yeah. It's interesting times. We will look back on this time, won't we? And we'll talk about it, and it'll be something that it has an air of being very surreal at the moment, really. But
it does, and when we do have pandemics and these kind of very kind of stop and think moments, there's always those green shoots. There's some really good stuff that's happening out as well in our communities, which is a blessing to see.
I mean, one of the things that's just changed beyond belief is, as a GP, we have had to think about, we've had to sort of pivot on the way that we see patients, because we can't bring everybody down to the surgery, because we're not particularly worried about ourselves, but we are worried about being an agent for cross-infection in the community. Right. And, within the space of a few weeks, we've been able to transition into using apps and virtual consultations and doing way more stuff on the phone. And it's amazing when you have to progress, because medicine isn't the most progressive. It is in some aspects, but in terms of using tech in the consultation, we're way behind the times. But it's amazing actually what red tape you can kind of do a hop, skip and a jump over when you really need to. So I think that, like you say, green shoots that probably will change the nature of my working day in the surgery forever, actually. Yeah.
I think it will touch every single one of us. But Sarah, thank you so much for your insight again on sleep. And we'll make sure that we do our kind of cross checks, and we'll certainly let you know how Ben and I get on in having a good night.
Thank you.
Wake me up from my nap.
Thank you so much, both of you. It's lovely to chat. And as I say, I love the engagement tree, and thanks for inviting me on.
Pleasure.
Take care. Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes. So thank you very much. And guys, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you can keep up to date with all of these fabulous conversations that we're having, and keep up to date with our fabulous guests. And we will see you all very soon.